3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode, I didn't bother to check, of Midweek Metagame. I'm a sometimes co-host of this podcast, Patrick Robertson, filling in for Harry MTG, who's off busy somewhere celebrating Christmas before COVID catches us all. I'm joined by my regular co-host, Gab Nassif, tonight.
Hey, what's up, everyone?
And joining us for the first time, the Dark Lord himself, Andrew Cuneo.
Hi.
Andrew, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
I'm honored to finally be invited. I've been waiting for this for a long, long time.
How long is that in particular?
Definitely since you had Reed on. I couldn't believe you had Reed on before me.
We actually had Reed twice on, I think, before you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well. As Harry would say, we have a lot to get through tonight. Alchemy is live on Magic Arena. Gab played Pioneer, and so did I, but probably the less said about that, the better. Maybe we'll get into some other stuff. Andrew's obviously played Magic for a million years, and we can ask him a million questions about Tobias Andrion versus Gosta Dirk saga from Legends lore. But before we get into anything, podcast is always brought to you by cardmarket.com. Magic Card Market is a place you can buy, sell, trade Magic paraphernalia, trading card paraphernalia, singles, accessories, etc. Go to them, spend money there, perhaps make money there if you wish to sell things. They sponsored the podcast for a while, so thank them very much. And the podcast is also brought to you by you, the patrons from patreon.com. We have 2 patrons today. Their names are Pedro and Aaron, so thanks very much for joining and getting involved in the Discord. And if you would like to do so, you can do that at patreon.com/midweekmetagame, but there's obviously no obligation to do so.
Yeah,
Shall we jump into things?
Thanks to both of you.
Yes. Thank you to both of you. Yeah. We should jump into things. Alchemy is live. I haven't given my thoughts on the topic at all, but I'll kind of intersperse them throughout other people's commentary on how they've enjoyed the format so far. Andrew, you're the guest. You can start. What have you been doing in Alchemy? Are you excited for the format in general? Tell me a little bit about what's been going on in the last few days.
I was very excited for the format, actually. I was a little bit surprised that so many people in the community were so resistant to the idea. I felt for a while like I only really play Magic by playing Arena at this point. And I felt in a lot of ways that Arena was just a second-class client because they were never doing any power level balancing to the cards. So we were just stuck with a bad standard, over and over. So Arena would just get still very quickly. So I was very much in favor of the nerfing of kind of the outlier cards that were too good, like Epiphany and Chariot. So I was really excited about that. I was kind of indifferent to the additional digital-only cards. But now that I've gotten to play with them some, I think that for the most part, they're actually really fun. And with one exception, I think they're all pretty well balanced, only one of them I think is really overpowered. Most of them are either balanced or bad. And I think that a lot of the digital-only mechanics actually make the games more fun to play. Because a lot of times in Standard, once you've played the format for a little while, you just get the same game that you've already played. And so it doesn't really stay fresh, but the little bit of extra RNG on the cards, I actually think really helps the replayability of the format.
That's that's the side of the argument I never really heard up until this point. A lot of the time when people talk about these kind of digital card games versus Magic, they say, obviously all the RNG in Magic is just in the mana system, and then so we just have the cards that do what it says printed in the text box. Whereas Hearthstone has to kind of make up for its structured non-random mana system by giving you RNG in the game. But it's interesting to see that there's actually a room in the Magic game engine for a little bit of variance or extra variance on top to make it a bit more flavorful.
Yeah, it was actually interesting. I don't know if it's a coincidence or if YouTube can read in my mind, but I was watching yesterday the little talk Richard Garfield gave many years ago on one of the first Magic cruises about luck versus skill in games and game design. And he was mentioning that a way to make games more fun sometimes or less repetitive is to add some RNG. So it was kind of interesting that you brought that up right away, Andrew, and I agree. I've liked Alchemy. I like the concept in a vacuum. I think you have Arena, why not take advantage of it? I was already a fan of the Davriel Planeswalker, some of these other cards they had in Historic, since Historic was the first kind of arena-only format where they could do that kind of stuff. And I think that it's a good idea to take advantage of Arena's potential. I'm a bit worried about, as a competitive player, how they tie an extra format in the mix. Are they kind of planning on getting rid of Standard? Do they even have a plan? So that part I'm a little worried about, but I like the idea of Alchemy in a vacuum anyways, and it's been fun so far.
I see where you're going with the kind of what do you do with Standard at this point argument. I mean, maybe this is kind of conversation for later on after we've discussed the kind of the good things about Alchemy in general. But I definitely agree with you that taking advantage of the Arena platform to do something unique and exactly like what Alchemy is trying to do is probably the right direction for them to go. But how it ties into paper in general is going to be something that has to play out over the next little while. I could imagine a world where we just kind of have sets that come out digitally and sets that come out like Modern Masters or Modern Horizons for paper tournaments or paper play, and the two things essentially diverge from this point forward. I think is probably how it plays out in the long term.
Yeah, so Andrew, what's the card that you think is overpowered?
Inquisitor Captain.
Yeah.
I think certainly in Historic, it's so easy to make it so it just chains over and over. And you can, you just keep getting a rebuy on the Inquisitor Captain through Glasspool Mimic or Mirror Image or Charming Prince. And so you just get so much power from just a 4-mana card. That doesn't really seem balanced to me. And even in Standard, just with Glasspool Mimic, people chain them a lot.
Yeah, I actually haven't ran into these decks in Standard or Alchemy, but I was playing Historic today, and I was myself playing that deck, and I got into a bunch of mirror matches. Some people who are already ready was the Mistcaller in the sideboard to tutor for to conjure was the Grizzled Veteran or whatever it's called, Grizzled Huntmaster. So yeah, that was interesting. It does feel like in Historic anyways, from the little I've played, that deck can be really powerful. You get Mirror Image and Simic and etc. You can make it a Yorion deck. So it might just be kind of dominant, and then in response, people might have to play Hushbringer decks or Stern Strict Proctor decks, counter them. So it might narrow down the meta too much, but I was also not sure what the best way to deal with just black-green food was. I played that matchup once, and like Meat Hook Massacre was all of a problem, but
I think that maybe if you just put the Inquisitor Captain into the Heliod deck and you just kind of go for combo kills.
Yeah.
I think that might be the best way to do it.
Yeah, I wanted to try something a little newer, but obviously you can just put that card in Heliod, put that card in white-green. I was wondering if there's actually room for 8 4-mana cards in these type of decks. Seems like a lot, but you also, I don't know, an easy way to lose the game is to not draw your companies in some matchups, and Captain's maybe even better because it doesn't suffer from the Thalia tax. I was saving that for a bit later, for maybe when things get serious.
Yeah, that was kind of I haven't played very much with the Captain decks either because they just seem kind of overpowered and also very repetitive because they just basically try to do the same thing every game. I think in Historic, at least with the Heliod deck, you might want to play the Huntmaster and just have like a Heliod, a Captain, and a Scurry Oak in your sideboard to get with the Huntmaster. Yeah. So you wouldn't necessarily have 8 4-mana cards, you might only have 7.
Yeah.
Is the Huntmaster tutor from the sideboard, or does it give you a sideboard creature at random?
No, it conjures from your sideboard, meaning I think you can conjure the same card over and over again. So if you have a Yasharn that you want for, the sack matchup, but the deal was the first one, I think you can keep conjuring the same cards.
If you can blink the Huntmaster, you can get the same, you can keep getting new Yasharns. Also, the way the Huntmaster works, if you just have duplicates of a creature in your hand, the first time it comes into play, you can just get rid of all of the copies of whatever the card you're ditching in your hand is and just get that many Yasharns. It doesn't matter. You only need one copy in your sideboard.
Okay, all right. So, but I'm just haven't quite wrapped my head around the new terminologies, difference between conjuring and seeking, and probably a different one.
Seeking, you always get stuff from your deck, and it's removing the card from your deck when it happens. Conjure,
Okay.
you're just creating it out of thin air.
I guess that makes sense.
But it's not a token; it's an actual card. So then it can be reshuffled, bounced to your hand, etc.
Yep. Okay, no worries. That's fine. That distinction is relatively clear now. Okay.
And I guess for those of you who don't know, I'm not sure if we talked about it last week or you didn't listen last week, but Alchemy is the new arena-only format, which is basically the standard card pool plus nerfed. I think there's 4 or 5 nerfed cards: Faceless Haven, Epiphany, Goldspan Dragon, Chariot, and Luminarch Aspirant, and a set of 60-ish Alchemy cards, which are new cards that I don't know if they all use or abuse in some ways the arena mechanics that you couldn't really replicate.
Some amount of arena mechanics.
Yeah. That's a format, and that has had historic is still historic, but it's been impacted, meaning that the nerf cards from Alchemy are also nerfed in historic. So Chariot is nerfed. The most notable one maybe is Luminarch Aspirant, even though it got a really good replacement. Yeah, I guess I'd clear that out.
So you've been talking a bit about the impact of these Alchemy cards in historic. What about in the actual format, Alchemy itself? Have you had a chance to play any of the kind of modified standard?
I've been doing nothing but playing that since Alchemy came out, and I think it definitely has given a ton of new stuff to explore. And I think that once things settle down, assuming they ever do, it's going to be a much better meta than just blue-red versus green versus white, which was what standard was before, really.
That's a relatively low bar, but you think the new cards are really adding something, or is it just the kind of the nerfs to those powerful cards from those decks?
Well, I think the nerfs would have improved things just on their own, but the new cards, like there's a card, Sanguine Brushstroke, which gives you a blood artist and a blood token, and you drain when you sack blood. That card has really moved the kind of mono black deck from being just a not very good deck to being an actively strong deck. There's also a whole bunch of different cards you can put into blue control decks that it's not really clear to me what the best way to build blue control decks is now, but I think there might actually be multiple viable ways to build them. And there's I think maybe 4 cards from Alchemy that all of them seem like they could fit. Maybe even more than that.
I mean, I've seen a couple of different counter spells. There's the 3-mana counter spell that reduces the cost of cards that share a type of the spell you counted in your hand. There's also the Dismiss as well.
I think both of those cards are pretty bad.
That's fine. I've also seen the Divination seems pretty powerful with the same kind of Grizzled Huntmaster style text.
Yeah, I played that one a lot. I like that card a lot. It's really good with the modal lands, like especially Jwari Disruption, where you get to a point in the game where Jwari Disruption doesn't really, it's a bad land and it's not a spell you're ever going to want to cast, and you can just use Unexpected Conversion, I think is the name of it, you draw 2 cards, so it's a divination, then you loot away the Jwari Disruption. I guess you exile it, and you get a replacement for that, and then you can also get all the other copies out of your deck. So I felt like it pushes you when you build your control deck to play a lot more situational cards as well that are only going to be good in certain matchups. So I went to playing like 4 Doomskars in a deck, which I probably wouldn't do if I didn't have a way to get rid of them. And I also have Test of Talents in my main deck, which is another card that you can easily, discard to Unexpected Conversion. And also there's another new card called Key to the Archive, which you need to discard cards to feed. So I feel like it's really opened up how to build blue decks now in a way that's pretty interesting. Have you, Gab, have you come to opinions on which of the blue cards you think are good or bad?
I think I agree with you that the Channeler and the Formula are not super great, especially the Channeler. and I still haven't figured out how to build a control deck I liked. I've had relatively very little success with control decks so far, whether it's blue-white, blue-red, or Esper. And the decks I've won the most was on the ladder is just red-black Vamp with very few new cards. I tried the new 4-drop. It's pretty decent. Free Death Touch for 4, where when it enters a battlefield, your opponent discards their most expensive card. That card's solid, but not much better or worse than the other Vamps 4-drop. And the fact that it's a Vamp itself is not really that big of an upside. I think there was maybe one game where I got to cast it up the Vampire land where I didn't have actual black mana, so it was an upside there, but the type is pretty relevant on the cheaper creatures, on the more expensive ones, less so. And that mono black deck, I played a bit too, and that deck was decent for me. I agree with you that new enchantment, the Brushstroke, is good. And I know that other people have had decent amount of success with black versions of the kind of a sacrifice build. But I was curious to hear more of your thoughts about control decks. I haven't been blown away by Key to the Archive. I think that card is fine. Maybe a little overhyped. Maybe still useful. Also depends if people start showing up with Artifact Hate. That can backfire big time because it's pretty expensive. So I'm curious to know how you've been building your control decks. If you think they're actually good compared to, maybe mono white, mono black, Vamps. The mono red decks have looked good, whether it's Burn or the Dragon version. These decks have looked kind of scary. So,
well, I think mono white is really bad in Alchemy relative to where it used to be, just because it's so bad against the black decks. What the control deck I've had the most success with is just straight blue-white, and I think it's been a while since I've even lost with it when I played it on the ladder. Like I'll play that, my rank will improve a lot, then I'll go and just try something else and my rank will tank again. But so the way I've been playing it, I've been playing with Key to the Archive, like 3 or 4 copies of that. And then one card that's great with Key to the Archive is Teferi, who slows the sunset. Just because if you're like on the play and you can afford to just play turn 4 Key, and then you have a Teferi the next turn, you're so far ahead. So that's been really good. I agree with you that Key isn't overpowered. I think it's at a good spot power level wise where it's clear that people respect it enough that they're starting to play with like a Braid to destroy it. Like it's at a good enough spot where people respect it and they plan around it when they build their decks, but it doesn't just feel busted to me. Like
what sort of cards can you draft? What sort of cards are in the archive that you can draft that are really?
Well, you get all the cards. They're all from the Strixhaven Mystical Archive. So it's you can get Demonic Tutor, you can get Regrowth, which those are just kind of fun to play with. You can get Counterspell. The card most people generally want to get is Approach of the Second Sun, just because if you play, it does lead to this one broken draw where if you get to play Key on turn 4 and you get Approach and you just play Approach on turn 5, like a lot of the decks aren't fast enough to ever beat that.
Okay.
Especially if you have memory deluge.
All the Mystic Archive stuff. That's great.
Yeah. So I have one with blue-white control just on turn 7 by casting Approach the second time. But mostly it's like removal spells. There's a couple of whammies in the spellbook. There's Claim the Firstborn, which I've never seen a situation where you'd want to get that. There's Growth Spiral, which makes really no sense to get once you've already played your 4-mana artifact that generates mana. But for the most part, you're gonna see 3 cards to draft one of, and usually there's something that's appealing to get. There's a Day of Judgment in there, which a lot of times that's the one that you really want to see.
I was going to ask what the exact mechanics for drafting is, and it's look at 3. It's like Discover in Hearthstone. So yeah, look at the 3 cards and choose one of them.
Yeah, and all the spell books have 15 cards, so you're looking. It's a 20% chance to hit the card you really want, and most of them you can go through and you can figure out what are the 3 worst cards to see for my particular deck, and you're only going to have to take the 3rd worst one. So if you're like a blue-white control deck that never wants to claim the firstborn, you're never going to be stuck with that. Like that's the worst card, I would say. So you figure out what are the two other bad ones, and like whatever the third worst one is, that's the worst the card's ever going to be for you.
Yeah.
I played against a mono red deck that had 4 abrades in it, and it also had this card from AFR called you question prisoners or something that is literally just shatter or anticipate off your opponent's deck.
Oh, I like that card in draft.
Yeah, I like that card in draft too, but that's what I mean when people are preparing to play against Key. Like that person clearly wanted their deck to be good against Key. This was all in their main deck, that they had a braid and this other card, and they were like a spells-based red deck. But I think that most people's red decks have a braid in them now at this point because they want the option of blowing up the Key. So it's not like the Key the Key is good, but there's counterplay to it, and I think it's at a healthy balance level right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I've tried many builds of control. I've tried the Key and Teferi. I agree it's pretty good, but even that is not that busted. Key is not technically card advantage. It's all mana advantage plus a card, but that card's not always great. Teferi it's cute and all, but it feels sometimes hard to get ahead. Some of your cards are really expensive and clunky, and just haven't been super impressed so far. So yeah, maybe I'll have to try and steal one of your lists and try again. I've mostly had success with control decks. I'm surprised you say white is that bad. I agree it's not gonna be super great against these black decks, but even against the black decks with the new 3/1, you get to tap these annoying blockers that get some damage fruit, and maybe you get to clear them with Skyclave. You do have like pretty good raw power with the captain. And you still have Faceless Haven even though it's nerfed, but I'm guessing that deck's still gonna be decent against control decks.
Yeah, it is still decent against control decks. I think I've heard you say it a few times on your stream that you think the new, I think it's called Sigardian Evangel, is just better than Luminarch Aspirant. And I think you're very wrong about that. I think that Evangel's a good card, but Luminarch Aspirant was like the best card in the white decks. And it was specifically really good against black because when you were on the play, you could make a creature that was just going to be bigger than Meathook Massacre. Just like up the curve, unless they had some crazy draw with Deadly Disputes. So now, like the black decks, they just always get you with Meathook Massacre. Like it, short of you just having your taxing creatures live, you're gonna get swept by Meathook Massacre. And those black decks always have 3 or 4 copies in it. And like usually, like sometimes you can beat them if they sweep once. Even that's not guaranteed. But like the second time you get swept, the game just ends. Is my experience.
Yeah, that's fair.
Is Aspirant just not playable anymore? I mean, it feels like it still races Meathook Massacre in the same way. It just doesn't deal. Does 1 less damage.
I think it's just not playable anymore because it just deals damage so much more slowly. Because it's not just that you it's not like you miss 1 damage a turn, because a lot of times you miss an attack because you don't get to grow whatever creature was going to get to attack. I mean, maybe people still should be playing with it, but I think that is the card that got nerfed the most, and it really wasn't the most overpowered card to start.
What about Chariot? I feel like Chariot got kind of pretty powered down.
Yeah, huge nerf. Monogreen might still be fine, but I'll go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I was of the opinion before that Chariot was the most overpowered card, even though Epiphany was the dominant thing. It was like Epiphany just matched up really well against the Chariot decks for the most part. Chariot was just like, I don't understand how they printed that card. If you've been playing for a while, there was a point where the 4-mana Gideon was the best card in Standard, and people are like, wow, this Gideon's really oppressive.
Yeah.
And Chariot is just like much better than that Gideon.
Yeah, Chariot is like Gideon that's been in play for 2 turns.
Yeah.
To be fair, wasn't Chariot not quite good enough in the first few formats it was in, like until we got rotation and stuff?
Well, one of the things that held it back was, so first of all, if you look at the decks right before rotation, a lot of them were 4 Chariot decks. Like that Winota deck was a 4 Chariot deck. just the Gruul deck with Magda was a 4 Chariot deck. But one of the things that held Chariot back before was just Lovestruck Beast. Like people could actually play a 3-drop that you weren't going to be able to attack with your Chariot. And also there was the Sultai Ultimatum deck that kind of went over the top of the Chariot decks that weren't super fast. I was playing just a green-black deck that had 2 mana accelerants, Chariot, and Ren and 7. And like when you get the turn 3 Chariot, turn 4 Ren draw, it's still just completely ridiculous. I think Chariot is still completely fine.
Yeah. There's also the new pup. That card has seemed kind of okay. Some of the new wolf and the werewolf cards.
What does the pup do exactly? It's like it's a Savannah lands that gives your next creature
unfortunately,
+1/+1?
it's not a Savannah Alliance. It's a 1/2 for a green, and the next creature you cast gets a +1/+1 counter, a trampled counter, and I think a vigilant counter. So it's not amazing in spot removal because you can just kill your next creature and kind of lost the advantage. But it is the good type. It has the wolf type, so if you want to play it with maybe Tavalar, the Lord that draws cards. The problem is the mana I think is not great in these. If you try to play the werewolf decks, it's hard to have consistently, untap green on turn 1 into whatever you need, maybe double green or red green on turn 2, etc., etc.
It's probably time for them to print some red-green snarls.
Yeah, I don't know if that would
Well, if
help.
you want to make the mana worse, you could do that. There's a new land in Alchemy that is just great, the Forsaken Crossroads. So it's kind of like a cross between a Pathway and a Scry land. And that definitely makes the mana better in 2-color decks, although it's a little awkward that if you're on the play, it's always going to come into play tapped. But it is, if you're on the draw, it's just, you just have a Pathway with upside.
Yeah.
I think you can 100% make the mana work if you want to play green-red werewolves, and I have lost to that a bunch. And it does seem like that deck actually, the nerf to Chariot did make it so that maybe Arlen Cord is better than Chariot in that specific deck. It seems like people are actually playing Arlen Cord now, whereas before you would just never put any 4-drop in your deck before you had 4 Chariots.
Yeah. There's also
my experience with the werewolf deck is I think it's still probably worse than just playing mono green, because it's a lot of the same cards, but you never get the draws with Blizzard Brawl where you feel like your opponent just has no chance. Because you draw Blizzard Brawls and play them one curve, and
that's a real good card.
Yeah, you do get some dumb pop into free werewolf into maybe the Lord that draws cards, or the haste adds up to the 2/3 the Seeker.
What was the nerf to Faceless Haven exactly?
Just lost the power.
It's just a 3/3 now. Okay, all right, it doesn't hit quite as hard. At least that kind of opens up a bit of space. Like it's okay for you to not play Faceless Haven. You can just play Dens and Lairs of the Hydra.
Yeah, it definitely brings it more into balance with those other things.
Yeah. I like what they've done in general. I think in terms of these nerfs, then from what I'm hearing, opening up space for other cards that have been on the fringe.
Are you aware of the cards that got buffed? Or actually,
I am. I think I know more about the cards that got buffed than anything else. It's that Wizard class got buffed, right? And
yep, that got buffed. Druid class got buffed.
And then the artifact, the elixir.
Oh, the one that gains 2 life and draw a card.
Add its cry 1 to it. It's.
Oh, now I'm interested. I
had someone play that against me. They lost very easily. The Scry 1 wasn't enough to win it for them.
Okay.
I think I heard you saying on your stream the other day, actually, Andrew, that you're glad they haven't gone wild with buffing cards, though, and I definitely agree with you. Your rationale seemed pretty sound. You want to share it with people?
Yeah, so I'd heard some people say that they thought it would have been better to just buff a bunch of cards and leave the outliers where they were, like don't nerf Chariot, don't nerf Alrund's Epiphany, just try to buff cards up to that point. And the problem with that is if you only buff like 10 cards or whatever, it's really boring for the players because the players just, okay, we'll only look at the cards that got buffed and we'll see if they're good enough. Now, it doesn't leave much of a format to explore. By just nerfing the handful of outliers, it really opens the format up so everybody gets to explore it again and try to figure out, okay, what's good now, rather than being told, here are the cards that might be good enough now, go try them. It's, explore the whole format again, which I think is way more fun for the players.
Yeah, it definitely exhibited a bit of self-restraint.
The cards that they buffed, though, like why they bothered to do those buffs, I have no idea. They didn't change them really at all. They did this previously with the digital cards in Historic, where they made a handful of buffs that were just all completely pointless.
It just makes me wonder if are those cards that they had earmarked for constructed play at some point in time in their internal testing at some point. They're like, why is no one playing with Wizards class? I know it's 2 mana more expensive on the third chapter. That's why.
Well, they gave the rationale for at least Cosmos Elixir, and I think the same rationale applies to the other cards, where they looked at the data that Cosmos Elixir was a card that people crafted a lot on Arena and then also tended to lose with a lot. So they were like, well, this is a card people like. Why don't we just try to make it better so they have a better experience with it? But why they were so tame in how they changed it, there's no way that they're moving the needle by adding Skywand.
Feels like they're baiting people a second time. At least they already have them craft, so they're not baiting them into crafting
At least they can't dust them, which has definitely happened to me in Hearthstone, where I would they would nerf something, I would dust it, and then they would buff it again, I would rebuy it. It's just, this is where I've always just thrown my money down the toilet.
Yeah.
Feel that Elixir card there's probably some numbers you can change on it to make it a card that you would put in your control deck or whatever.
Yeah, make it cost 3, and then I would at least try it.
What about 3 life?
I don't even think it would be busted if it costs 3.
You could gain 3 life. I think 3 life's a pretty significant number compared to 2.
I think even at 4 mana, that's just not good enough.
Yeah, I suppose so. I also feel like we're at the point in Magic where gaining incremental amounts of life is not actually as good as it doesn't really do very much anymore. People deal damage in chunks of 7 and 8.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind if you went a bit more into detail in your latest version of Blue-White Control. Does it have Divide by Zero? Does it have Layer? I found that maybe building around Layer still made the most sense.
All right, so the version I've had the most success with, I do not have Layer in my deck. I have just 2 Hullbreaker Horrors. I watched you play some with a blue-white deck that had Leer and Divine Purge. I think that's the new one.
Yeah.
I don't think that card is good. It makes sense with Leer, but I just think it's a bad card. So I was just playing 4 Doomskars, and then I had main deck 2 Test of Talents, main deck 2 Saw It Comings, and then also 4 Divide by Zeros. I think it's crazy not to play 4 Divide by Zeros in blue. And then for my top end, I think I had 4 Key to the Archives and 2 Teferis and then 2 Hullbreaker Horrors and 4 Doomskars. And it felt like it played out really smoothly. You can do this thing, which it's generally overkill, but you can get to a point in some games where you can use Hullbreaker Horror to bounce the key to keep going through the spellbook to get what you want, which I have actually had that come up.
And
I also tried Esper with Leers and not playing counters, still playing keys, but playing duresses and stuff. And the mana is good in those decks, but I think it's maybe not good enough. It's really hard to make it easy to cast the stuff you want to cast on turn 2 and have your land come into play untapped on turn 3 was my experience. Just playing 12 of the Deserted Beach cycle plus Jawari Disruptions plus the Manlands. I felt like I just wasn't good enough against the aggro decks when I was playing 3 colors.
Yeah, I thought the mana was okay, but you do lose out on Field of Ruin, and you probably lose out on maybe some of the plate cards, Mirror's Call. So the cost, it adds up. I did like having access to Vanishing Verse. I thought that was kind of a cool card in the meta. Can get rid of the enchantment. It kills a horror. It kills a lair. It kills most things unless you get paired against Bard class, which actually happened once when I was playing Esper. I lost just super badly to Bard's class. My removal didn't line up well at all. I couldn't really get rid of Bard's class. I was playing a bunch of these Divine Purge and not enough Dooms cards. I was kind of excited about Divine Purge because I thought it would be good against these black decks, exiling their stuff, exiling their treasures, and etc. as well. And, I figured eventually maybe people will start playing white and green again and exiling Troll, casting it again later in the game. But in practice, that's not the matchups I got, and the Divine Purge was all underwhelming for me, so... Yeah, do you have extra card advantage? Do you have 4 copies of the Divination of Unexpected Conversion?
I've been playing like a mix. I think I was playing maybe 3 of the Divination and like 2 Memory Deluges. I also tried Discover the Formula some, which is a card a lot of people are excited about. That card's okay.
Yeah.
One card I was playing with that seems kind of bad, and I was expecting to take it out of my deck, but it's actually been great for me, is Nico Eris.
Yeah.
Is that the
Planeswalker
that makes shards?
Yeah.
That makes shards and kills things. It like the blue-white deck, when you play 4 Key to the Archives, you do ramp into a lot of mana, so Nico actually does just kind of become ridiculous in some spots. And also in the blue mirrors, just playing it on turn 3 a lot of the time is good. So I wouldn't play a ton of that card, but that card has actually been surprisingly good for me.
Yeah, the card always...
thing I found when I was playing blue-white that... I know, Gab, when you first started, you were playing 4 Fierce Retributions, I think?
Yeah.
And I think it's a mistake to not play... What's the one that gives them a treasure? It's like the new Declaration in Stone.
Fateful Absence.
Yeah. That card's been pretty good for me in small numbers, and Valorous Stance has been pretty good for me in small numbers. I do like the Fierce Retribution. I started playing some of them in the sideboard. The other thing you lose by playing Divine Purge is you can't really play Portable Hole, and I think Portable Hole is just a really good removal spell in a control deck.
You could just play it, right? You just get to cast it again for 2 more, and it's not that big of a deal, right?
It's a pretty big deal if you're putting their card that you exiled back into play, and then you have to spend 3 more mana to get rid of it.
Oh, right. It comes there. They get their card back into play. I'm dumb. Yeah, it is a big deal.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, to be fair, when I read Divine whatever, I thought it was kind of bad, and Chad just kept hyping it up and kind of talked me into trying it out, and I got like excited about it. It's like, oh yeah, maybe it is really good and stuff. And
can you recite the text on Divine whatever to me, since you don't know the name and I don't know the card either?
It's Divine Retribution,
Purge,
maybe?
I think.
Purge. It's white 1 sorcery. You exile every artifact and creature that costs 3 or less, and they gain. You can cast them for 2 more, so they all get Spellbinder, kind of.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So the idea is you play it once, and by the time they can cast it again, you either play another one, or you play Lear and play it again, or you don't even care about it anymore because it's their cheap stuff, and you moved on to the late game.
I've seen people try it in Historic. It might be good in Historic, where just taxing the early plays makes more sense.
Yeah.
But I think especially in Alchemy, a lot of the creature decks are just Inquisitor Captain decks. So having your sweeper not even hit Inquisitor Captain is particularly bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It also has added bonus that, if you cast multiple, it stacks up, so they cost 4 to cast next. So in theory, it sounds kind of good, but the fact that it doesn't hit enchantment has been bad for me between the Brushstroke and the Bard's class. It was kind of random, but Bard's class might be decent. There's some good legends. One card you didn't mention in red-green that's pretty solid is Alana and Helena, I believe the card is called.
Yeah.
It's the 4-drop 2/3 that gives a creature +2/+1 haste or something, right?
Mm-hmm. It's like equals to its power and haste, so that card's kind of nice. But it was fun. It was kind of a joke when I played that matchup with my Esper deck, because like Vanishing Verse didn't really do anything. Divine whatever didn't do anything. And then when I finally had a removal spell, they just had the Snakeskin Veil. They had haste. They like one-shot me basically. It was one of their creatures plus Selena. So it was
Yeah, close game.
But yeah, I'm curious. I haven't played Alchemy in a couple days, but I've just been having success with red black vamps. I'm surprised you don't like that white 2-drop. I didn't play a ton with white because I didn't want to just jam. That's kind of the basic white aggro deck, but I was in the few matches I played, I was so impressed by that Frio, and I kept thinking that I think it's better than pre-nerf Aspire, and that's how good I thought it was. The capability was just super relevant every time. The card advantage, the getting, you can get 2 extra copies when you get 6 mana. That card was amazing for me.
I actually played a lot with that card. I made a white weenie deck that was trying to take advantage of this other new card called Suntail Squadron. That's a white, and 2 instant. And when you play it, you basically fill your hand up to 7 cards with 1/1 Suntail Hawks. So I built my deck around that. So I had like the Monk of the Even Hand and Clarion Spirit, and they had the Evangel. So I had all the white weenie stuff that gets a benefit when you play more than 1 spell in a turn. And then I was like trying to just dump my hand and then play the Suntail Squadron to fill my hand back up with the Hawks. And I had Paladin class and I had Intrepid Adversary as kind of anthem effects to make the Hawks better. But I also just had 4 of the Sigardian Evangel, which is the card you said you liked. And it's definitely a good card. There's no doubt about it. But really, I think that the problem is the black decks got a lot better.
Yeah.
And the black decks just really beat up on white. I've never beaten one of those black decks with a white weenie deck. My deck was maybe a little bit oddball. Maybe you could make it somewhat better in that matchup, but you're fighting an incredibly uphill battle, I would say. And even like the blue-white control decks now, they play a lot of sweepers too, and they're less susceptible, I would say, to Thalia. So it's really rough for white weenie right now. Maybe the meta settles down and like the black deck kind of falls out of favor, and then I think white would be good again. But if you have to play against that black deck too much, it's pretty hopeless.
The black deck is still playing the 8/1/1s for 1, right?
No, you don't play iWitch anymore. You get the Cursebound Witch, which is one of these draft cards. You can actually assemble Cat Oven in Standard.
Ooh.
I did that day 1 of Alchemy. It was great.
I still haven't done it. You play the Shambling Gas. You can play, some numbers of Curtains. And I've been playing, actually, a few Sorins. I know Kowalski's been winning a lot and playing a lot that deck. For some reason, I never see Sorins in his lists, which doesn't make sense. The latest list he shared on his Patreon has Key to the Archive in it, and still has multiple copies of Lulth and Blood in the Snow, or Blood on the Snow. So there's a few ways you can build. You have like some card choices you can make. I still like the Merchant, the 1/4. Bellstinger is also okay. I think you probably want to mix there. The Bloodcaster is actually really good in this deck. It's pretty easy to flip. It makes a lot of blood tokens, which is good with your brush strokes. And yeah, no, that deck is really cool and powerful. It doesn't look necessarily like the greatest, but it's been tough. And one thing we didn't talk about a ton is that the nerf on Epiphany is very real. They added a mana to the mana cost, even if you foretold it, and you only get the birds if you cast it up foretell, which means that even if you foretold it and you copy it, you don't get the bird. So you got nerfs in many different ways, and people have just not been playing Epiphany at all in their decks anymore. They just play Key to the Archive or the Formula, and they play Lear and the Horror as their top end.
It feels like in preparation for the last PT, when you were all exploring the various different blue-red decks, there was at least some tension between, are we supposed to be Epiphany? Are we supposed to be blue-red control? Are we playing Hullbreaker Horrors? Are we playing Lears? So it doesn't surprise me if you take a notch down off a significant notch out of Epiphany, you just completely change tack generally.
Yeah.
Well, I will say I built an Epiphany deck, and I think it's still really good. I think is the best way to use this card, Geist Channeler, which people have tried a lot. So Geist Channeler is a 1/3 that when it enters the battlefield, you get to perpetually reduce the casting cost of an instant or sorcery by 2 in your hand. It has to cost 3 or more, which I don't know why there's that clause on it, but so you use it to reduce the casting cost of Epiphany, and then you can foretell the Epiphany, and it still applies to when you're casting it out of foretell. So I built blue red, and I just had 4 Geist Channelers, which there's also 4 unexpected windfalls. So you can go turn 2 Geist Channeler, then on turn 4 you can play a windfall and galvanic iteration it if you Geist Channeler the windfall, which is really, really powerful. Like Epiphany is definitely worse, but Geist Channeler does actually make that deck better. I stopped playing with it because I think people just are kind of bored playing against Epiphany and bored of watching people play it. But I think that deck is probably pretty good.
I think it just adds up when people, they're ready for the grind and they hit you with go blank and stuff, and all of a sudden your Epiphanies are harder to cast, more expensive. And I've just played games where not getting these 1/1 tokens was the difference between winning and losing, multiple times. And
oh yeah, it's definitely worse. But there are cards that also make it, like Geist Channeler makes it better. I think that card Discover the Formula is good if you're going to be playing Geist Channeler anyway.
Yeah, but then you're playing a deck with like
mana draw or seek 3.
Yeah. And it reduces the cost, the casting cost of all your non-land cards in hand by 1, even your creatures. It can even hit lands, if you're playing a Mirror's Cult and Seagate Restoration. Then you're building your deck with like so many expensive cards. I mean, there's probably a decent build of the deck, but not like it was.
I think the build I was playing with, that seemed fine. I had 4 Windfalls, 3 Epiphanies, maybe like 2 Discovers and 2 Leers.
Yeah.
And I guess 2 Burn Down the Houses. So I mean, it was more expensive cards than a lot of decks would play. But you have the 4 Geist Channelers, and when you have one of those in your opening hand, one of the cards becomes a cheap card.
Yeah.
It honestly felt like a good deck to me. If I was actually preparing to play a tournament in Alchemy, that's one of the decks I would consider for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first deck I built, Channelers, Formulas, Epiphanies, and it just felt a little weak. I could see just playing Epiphany, maybe just 1 or 2 to just have that kind of top end and in the meta if a lot of these black mid-range decks and other kind of decks, and maybe good enough to play a few but not good enough to play 4, which was not even really the case before. People didn't always play 4 Epiphanies in every deck, whether they were Dragon or not. So I think it makes sense that Epiphany is not that great anymore. Everything else got buffed.
Yeah, I mean, it's no longer the deck that won 58% of the time when everyone was preparing for it as the top dog.
Yeah.
It's certainly nerfed from where it is if you just go back to playing Standard. But I think it's still completely reasonable to play. It's probably actually in a pretty good spot, which if people weren't sick of playing against Time Walk decks, then it would be more popular, I think.
This is really starting to sound more and more like a very good format, or an enjoyable format to play.
It's been a ton of fun for me. It seems like it's not that popular. Like it does seem like the queue times on the ladder are longer than they were in Standard, and I sometimes get really bad pairings because it's taken a while to get a match.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of inertia of people getting cards. I mean, there's no way of drafting these cards as well, which I think is a big kind of red flag against it, I guess. Yeah, or not against it, at least.
There's that problem, people being a little scared of using their wild cards. There's the fact that there's a qualifier this weekend that is limited, so maybe a lot of the good players that you would find at Mythic Ladder are practicing draft and limited. There's also, I think, people playing probably a little less just before the vacation. Maybe they at work to finish before going on vacation, or X and Y reasons. But there is not this weekend, but the one in January, end of January, is going to be Alchemy, and yeah, that's kind of exciting. I guess that's important for me. I feel the extra motivation to play a format that's used for competitive. I'm assuming the next Arena Championship will have Alchemy as one of the formats.
Well, I don't think they've necessarily announced that, but I think whatever they've set up to this point, you really need to take it with a grain of salt because it's going to depend entirely on whether they decide Alchemy is a success. Like, I think if they decide that Alchemy is a success, they'll just switch all the standard ones to be Alchemy going forward. But if it's a flop, then Alchemy will just become a weird casual format.
Yeah, we'll see. I agree. I don't feel like there's been like a huge maybe positive response to Alchemy.
It does seem like there's a group of people who just hate it because they either hate the digital changes or they hate the economic implications and they refuse to try it. And then there's the people who, just because the economy for getting into it is pretty painful, haven't been able to try it. But I think the people who have actually tried it have been generally very happy with it.
Yeah.
Like it's been a really fun release for me. And that seems to be a pretty widespread opinion, at least from what I've seen.
Yeah, and the servers didn't even really suffer. Maybe it's because there was less people playing than on normal releases, but
have you, I don't know if they fixed it today, there was a patch. Have you noticed any of the graphical bugs with the cards?
not with the cards. I noticed obviously the mythic rank symbol that's not mythic anymore. It's not that orange color, it's just kind of dark, or the diamond, it's literally a diamond emblem. Did they fix that as well?
I don't know. I didn't have time to play after the patch.
There was also, I didn't watch, but there was a show. I'm assuming neither of you watched either. The Magic show on the Twitch Magic channel about
With the Kamigawa preview.
Kamigawa. Yeah, maybe we can talk about it.
Yeah, almost certainly. I believe they spoiled one card and it was scrambled in the kind of like, Matrix style.
Oh, what was the card? You know?
Yeah, I do actually. It's one of the new Planeswalkers. It's like someone's already deciphered it, obviously within like minutes or something from this video. But I think it's like a colorless, a blue and a black for a Planeswalker with I don't know how much loyalty, and it has a static ability, but it also it's like +1, like draw a card, discard a card if you attack this turn, -2, make a 1/1 unblockable ninja, and then some ultimate that's, I think it looks like kind of like reanimate something if you deal combat damage to your opponent, like Inkai's ability.
It probably starts with free loyalty if it goes +1 and -2, make a creature and it costs
I think
free.
we can infer that.
What's the passive though? Oh no, they brought back passives on Planeswalkers.
Yeah.
I did draw yesterday, I think it was. I did draw into Narset. Just, as long as people will play Narset, people will try to draw into Narset, and yeah.
I had the exact same experience playing Pioneer this week, and I feel like Pioneer is the equivalent of what Alchemy could be if it doesn't get the support. If they decide that it's not worth their time, it's just going to be this weird casual format like Pioneer.
We're gonna talk about Pioneer. What next? Like Winter Orbs?
Yeah, I think Winter Orb might have a bigger audience than Pioneer. So yeah, I think we've probably plumbed the kind of depths of Alchemy for the time being.
Yeah.
Actually, there's one more card I wanted to bring up. That
absolutely, go for it.
I don't know if you've had a chance to play with it or against it, Kev. Ominous Traveler. It's a 2-mana 1/1 that it looks like it's pretty bad, but I've actually found it to be good. I've been playing it in a zombie deck. So you seek from a spell book. That the spell book is a mix of spirits, werewolves, zombies, and vampires. And so you get a creature, and whenever you play the creature that you got from the spell book, the Traveler goes back to your hand. So it's kind of like an Elvish Visionary that you get to keep rebuying, but you sometimes get really bad creatures. Like the spirits are all awful. You never want to take those. Those are the whammies for sure. And the wolves are pretty bad. But like the zombies are actually good. And the vampires it's kind of a mixed bag. It's been surprisingly good and just fun.
Yeah. I agree. That card looked like it could be strong if the creatures were maybe a tiny bit better.
Well, if you put it in a zombie deck, it might.
You get the Lord, right? The blue-black Lord is one of them.
Yeah, well, I wasn't playing blue-black, so the Lord wasn't a card in my deck, but the other 3 zombies are Champion of the Perished, Headless Rider, and Archghoul of Thraben, which are the 3 black ones are cards that people just play in normal zombie decks.
Yeah. I thought it would have maybe been cool if that card was a shapeshifter itself. Or maybe it would have been too good then.
Maybe, but I'm at least in a zombie deck, I think it's a good card. If you remember at the last set championship, Simon Gertzen was playing the Undead Butler in his deck, which is just embarrassingly bad. Ominous Traveler is much better than that card for sure.
Yeah. You can cast them, right? You don't need them. You can cast them as though they were.
Yeah, it makes all of the cards castable with any color mana. So you always get something you can play, but you can get the Shipwreck Sifters.
Yeah, I know.
Which is just like a bad draft common that there's no way that's going to be a good card in your deck.
Or Full Trader, how dare you? Show some respect, please.
No.
So, Pat, did you legitimately have some Winter Orb questions for Andrew?
Well, I feel like I've kind of heard most of the story in parts on your stream, but Andrew, there was this rumor that you once pitched a set to Aaron Forsyth that is entirely Winter Orbs. Is this true? And can you give me some detail as to what some of the cards actually were?
I've pitched a set of a Winter Orb themed set to multiple people at Wizards multiple times.
I love that they would listen to it a second
distaste, I would say. I love the card Winter Orb. It was like one of my favorite cards to play with when it was in what was standard at the time. So I designed a variety of Winter Orb themed cards. Like one of them is just a land that comes into play tapped that also has the Winter Orb text. Just for a fun uncounterable Winter Orb.
Is it
another one that I'm particularly proud of is just.
Does the land retain the mono card? Does the land retain the continuous artifact text? So it has to start your turn untapped to have the Winter Orb effect?
No. It wouldn't have the continuous artifact text. It would just be a lockdown. I always thought that was like the lamest part of actual Winter Orb, tapping it with Icy Manipulator. When I would play Icy in my Winter Orb decks, but I was always just untap the land my opponent, or I would always tap the land my opponent chose to untap. Because I didn't really want anybody to get out from under the Winter Orb, even a little bit. But so the coolest card, I think, there are 2 great cards that I pitched to them, which neither one are they ever going to print. So the first one is White X. Put X Winter Orb tokens into play, destroy all lands. So it has an inherent tension where you're getting all these Winter Orbs, but you're going to blow up all the lands, so they don't do anything.
So wait, it's a 1 mana Armageddon too?
Yeah, but you don't get any Winter Orbs then. You're obviously not going to play it and get no Winter Orbs. Just how many Winter Orbs do you want? Like, how many is worthwhile? And so after I came up with that card, I was thinking, well, some people might not like Winter Orbs as much as me, and they're going to need to sell this set. So let's go back and to a thing they used to do in Magic where they would just print hoser cards for the set, like City in a Bottle or Golgothian Silex or Apocalypse Chime. So, like even if you didn't like the set, you could just get a card that just expressed your dislike for the set. And I was like, all right, let's make a card like that. But then I was thinking, they don't really like making cards like that. So I put a twist on it. So here's the card. 1 in a black, Enchantment. If a player would untap more than 1 land in a turn, they lose the game instead. So what that incentivizes is like, you're really going to need to get a Winter Orb into play quick to not die to this card. So you just have to buy cards from the Winter Orb set, because before you tap 2 lands, you're going to need to have a Winter Orb out to make sure you don't lose. So they weren't that keen on the set, at least as far as I can tell, but they may be just saving it for, when Magic needs a really great, successful set to come out.
We don't know any of the cards in Kamigawa and Neon Dynasties yet.
You're right, it could be the new Kamigawa set.
It makes me think of that card. Did you ever hear that story about the OSIP Invitational card that he wanted to make? where it's
No, what was his?
I think it was 1 red, you win the game. Unless your opponent reveals that same card, then they win the game. So everyone had to play 4, no matter what, because or else you just lose if they cast it. But
it's a precursor to mental misstep.
I don't know what it was, but that was to make sure that everyone played. I think maybe I don't remember if it costed red or if it costed 0 or what it was, but yeah. It was maybe it was like 0 mana instant. Who knows? But that was the concept that you had to play 4 and to not get cheesed, and then you had to decide whether get the read on your opponent, kind of stare them down on turn 1, try and figure out if they have it, if you should go for it, or if you're gonna get whammied.
Yeah, do you have time to duress them to find out?
Yeah, or that.
Would you like to hear some fun actual stories of playing with Winter Orb?
Yeah, I'll hear a Winter Orb anecdote or two.
All right, so this one, it really stuck with me, which other people might not find it that interesting. But so I used to go and I would play at like a local game store, and this is when Winter Orb was in Standard. So this is 20 years ago, and I still remember this. I was playing, and I'd gotten out my Winter Orb, and I had an Icy Manipulator, and I think that the way it worked out, I wasn't going to be able to tap anything. I wasn't going to be able to tap their land the next turn. So my opponent's like, this is their one window. They're never going to have any lands for the rest of the game unless they're drawing them off the top of their deck, because I'm just going to tap every land they untap. So the only mana they're going to get for the rest of the game are just lands that they draw that come into play untapped. That's the only way for them to amass mana. So that I'm thinking, this is pretty good, but they've got a window. They could cast one more spell here and maybe I'll lose. So the opponent untaps and they cast the spell Mana Severance, which is 1 in a blue, and you can remove all your lands from your deck. So they literally, this is the last spell they chose to cast for the game. They just locked themselves out of ever being able to produce more than 1 mana in their upkeep.
All right.
I was just like, you really don't understand the way this Winter Orb is going to affect this game. They conceded, I'm pretty sure, pretty quickly after that. It is not a good idea to take all your lands out of your deck when Winter Orb's in play.
Did you consider that they just cast Mana Severance in protest to your Winter Orb deck?
No, I don't think so. I think that they built their deck with Mana Severance in it because they're like, I hate getting flooded drawing lands. So that's what they did, and they didn't draw a land for the rest of the game. And they also didn't cast a spell for the rest of the game.
So when I learned it, Winter Orb was in 5th edition, which is the first set that I ever played with. And I don't think we had a Winter Orb in our kind of like group of my friends that we learned to play with, but we had 2 copies of Stasis between the 3 or 4 of us. And that was the card that I kind of fell in love with playing early on in Magic. That was just absolute misery to play against and with. A Time Elemental and Stasis is like one of the first times I put something together, and I was like, okay, this is far more powerful than either of these 2 cards are on their own. My opponent will do nothing forever, and it was great.
Yeah.
I was never that big of a fan of Stasis. Like, Winter Orb has this effect on the game where it's like your opponent isn't completely done playing things, but it's going to be so painful for them every time they want to cast a spell. Stasis, a lot of times you just lock them out from ever doing anything, and they're like, okay, I can't do anything. The game's basically over. Winter Orb, it just slows the game down to this really painful grind, which I really enjoyed that experience.
Yeah. I don't remember the exact timing and the sets, but I believe that when it came back in 5th edition, it wasn't especially good in Standard because there was very few ways to abuse it. You didn't have Quirion Ranger, which was one of the best cards, was Winter Orb because you get to untap your mana creature and bounce a tap land, so you get to recast lands, replay lands every turn. I could be wrong, but I want to say it wasn't, because even when, I think by the time Opposition came around, it was gone, but you had, I think it was Static Orb when Opposition was legal in Standard. So I think it was never really that impactful in the 5th edition Standard when I kind of started playing more seriously too.
Opposition is another card that I just absolutely adore. It's one of my favorite Magic cards of all time. That was when Oath of Destiny was when I started kind of like turning up at the local store where tournaments were going on, and people were playing kind of, hermit decks with opposition, and it was just nothing that I could do. I could never cast any spells ever, and I was just like, this game's amazing. I want to play more and more and more, which is probably not a universal experience when you get locked out by opposition, but I have a very, very fond memories of the opposition. It's my favorite cube card as well.
That's the deck I lost to in the quarterfinals of my first nationals against Cuneo. I was playing Enchantress, and he was playing blue-green Mermaid opposition. That was my first top 8.
Do you feel like Magic could use more of this sort of effect in general?
I actually do. I think that one of the problems they've run into the past couple of years is they print ramp cards and they don't print enough counterplay to the ramp cards. So it actually leads to some really unfun games where if the person is ramping and they're on the play, a lot of times they just so easily overpower the person who's on the draw that there's just not enough room for interaction. They've done a little bit of getting that back in the standard with Redain and Thalia, but I think it's not enough. If you remember that standard where everyone just was playing 4 growth spirals, it was so miserable when you would be on the draw and your opponent would play a turn 2 growth spiral on the play, and you would start your 3rd turn and you'd just be like, it doesn't really matter what I do here. I'm just never going to catch up. And there was just no counterplay to it.
I do miss Stone Rain a lot. I feel like that card is probably make its way back into Magic and not be particularly unfun.
Well, they did just print a 4/4 Flying Avalanche Rider. Have you seen that card, Pat?
Is it actually an Avalanche Rider, or is it the thing that's like it's an Avalanche Rider, or it's Blight, isn't it, or something like that?
2 damage, yeah. 4/4 Flying for 2 red and 2, and a land gets either sack it in your upkeep or you have to take 2 damage.
I'll just take 2. It's fine.
It shuts off creature lands. It makes them something like that mana.
Oh, it removes the abilities as well. That's a pretty good Magic card. It's also pretty good against that Goblet or whatever that gains 2 life of 4-drop. It either Stone Rains them off 4 mana, or it just means that they can never get above 20.
Yes, you're right. That it isn't a clear counterplay to the Cosmos Elixir.
I mean, they buffed it. They have to put some kind of fallback plan in there.
Oh.
What do you think about that dragon deck? The red the 2 red decks, whether it's the kind of the more spell-based deck. I feel like that Lightning Bolt Haste creature is decent. The new the Pinger version was Alchemist, and the Shock that kind of iterates is good. I've also been impressed by the dragon deck with the Dragon Whelp.
I think that there's stuff to like in all of those decks. The Townraiser Tyrant, which is the new dragon, I think is a really good card. People put this card Fearsome Whelp in their deck, which is a 1/1 that makes your dragons cheaper on your. It perpetually reduces the casting cost by 1 of all dragons in your hand in your instep. I think that card's pretty poor. I didn't even put it in my deck when I was trying it. You get some really good draws with it, but you also get a lot of draws where it either dies, like it's your 2-drop that just dies to Spikefield Hazard, or it makes the dragon cheaper and then they just kill the dragon, or you draw it later on in the game and it literally does nothing because you can just play all the dragons off the top of your deck. I think it's just too low impact for what it is, but the actual the new dragon I think is very good.
Yeah, it's definitely high variance. You can have some pretty disgusting draws with turn 2 Whelp. I definitely was on the receiving end of a couple beatings of that deck and felt pretty helpless. But maybe in the long run, it's great.
I always hate the class of cards that they make where it's a card that makes your nut draw better, but it makes your average or slightly below average draws really bad. And I think that's just a classic example of that card. And usually the way competitive Magic works is you can't afford to play cards like that in actual serious competitive decks because you just get too many bad draws where you just can't compete.
Yeah, definitely not how I like to build my decks, but if they make them good enough, I guess if you're
Yeah,
okay,
I
was just really swingy games, but high percentage win rate. Why not?
yeah, I don't think it's actually going to be a high percentage win rate card, but maybe it will be, and I'll be
Yeah.
proven wrong.
Do you want to talk a bit about Pioneer, Pat? I played 3 rounds of Pioneer in a Pioneer showcase with Blue Red Phoenix. It was kind of fun. I think I messed up a bit. Both losses. There was maybe a tiny room for a win.
Yeah, I think I watched you play at least the Blue Red Phoenix. Did you say you played again as well with like Blue White?
No, Blue White was last showcase.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah. I mean, I logged into my Magic Online account one day this week, and you'd taken back the Ragavans because you were playing a bunch of Grixis Shadow. So I was like, what am I going to do with myself? I've got 30 minutes to kill where I just want to just play some Magic. So I built the deck that won the Pioneer Showcase, which is like Yorion Creativity with Sage of Falls and Locust God.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was fun. I creativity into the combo kill. I ground people out with Yorion. It has Elspeth Sun's Champion, the Sun's Nemesis, the 4-mana one, and it has a bunch of copies of that.
So it has all enchantments except for one Locust God, 1/2/5.
Yeah, exactly. And and obviously no artifacts as well. So yeah, you just flip into those things and kill them if you need to.
That sounds amazing.
It was pretty fun, and I played a little bit of Blue-Black Control as well, and won in a league before that as well. Before I decided to buy the bullet and buy some cards too. So played new 4-mana Sorin. The card was cool. I don't know. I just haven't played Pioneer since they banned all those cards, and it was nice to go back and play a format where everything is just cards that have come through standard, and they've taken away all the horrible things like there's no Teferi Time Ravelers or anything like that. It's just no Omnath. It's just kind of fair cards, and it was a decent Magic experience. It kind of felt like wholesome. I don't know if that's the best way to describe it. It felt wholesome to me. I was kind of just Magic as Garfield intended, and I'm not going to do it again in a hurry. I'll get Ragavans back off you, but it was fun.
Yeah. I played a decent bit of that Grixis Shadow deck in Modern. I thought it was really strong.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I 4-1 3 leagues, went 6-3 in the showcase, losing to Burn twice and Murktide once.
Should have played that one collective brutality like I told you to.
Yeah, that or maybe more Stubborn Denials in the sideboard, I was thinking, because your hope, I guess, against Burn is to dump a bunch of Shadow when you get low enough and have the 1 or 2 counter spells to just not die to their last couple Burn spells and kill them real fast with Shadows. I think that's the old Shadow deck used to win, as well as Humor Battle Rage. So maybe these cards would just be better than straight up Collective Brutality.
I mean, I think in that exact matchup, having Gomag Anglers and Stubborn Denials is a better place for you to be a Shadow, but I think the deck's obviously better overall as the way it's configured right now. Andrew, when was the last time you played a game of Modern?
I kind of want to say it was the last Modern Pro Tour, but I might have played one league a few months after that. I haven't played on Magic Online in a year and a half, maybe. And but before that, I was only drafting. Yeah. At this point, whenever I turn on some stream where people are playing Modern, I don't know what most of the cards do.
The format has certainly changed significantly since you would have last played it. So presumably the last time you played it was the Hogak PT?
Yeah, I played the Hogak PT, and then...
Did you play the GAC?
No, I played Blue-White Control.
How'd it go?
I thought my deck was fine against Hogak, but I lost the one match I played against Hogak. The match also featured a 45-minute deck check. It was the longest deck check I've ever seen.
Wow. Have you got any details about how it took 45 minutes? Were they playing Battle of Wits?
No, they were deciding whether or not to kick my opponent out of the tournament.
Okay.
They I can tell the story if you want. It's almost unbelievable what happened.
All right, I'm game.
All right, so we get a deck check, and it starts taking a while, and eventually the judges come and they ask my opponent to go away with them, which is always a sign that something bad is happening for the person who's been taken away. And usually they'll come back after 5 minutes or whatever, and the person's gotten a warning or they've gotten a game loss, depending on what the infraction was. This time, my opponent's just gone. He's gone for a really long time. Like we're halfway through the round. Eventually, a judge comes to just start keeping me company because they're worried that I was feeling lonely, I guess. And a little bit more time passes. Eventually, I asked the judge in front of me, "Is my opponent going to be coming back to play?" And he says, "No, probably not." But then we get towards the end of the round, and a different judge comes, and he asks me to move to the table that's like the highest table number. I'm like, okay, why am I doing this? He's like, your opponent's going to come back, and you're gonna play your match, but we want the rest of the tournament to move on without you. We don't want you guys to be holding up the tournament. So what they're going to do like a separate Swiss pairing for the next round, if they have to start it, where they're going to pair they're going to pull 2 other people out of the tournament, one to play the winner of my match and one to play the loser of my match, with the idea that eventually we'll catch up with the rest of the tournament. So they bring my opponent back, we play, and the match actually goes fast, so we don't we don't get lapped by the tournament. We actually get to play again. But my opponent tells me, and I really wish he hadn't said this, he told me that he's sorry about the delay. What had happened was all of his Hogaks were marked. And what he told the judges was that they must have been marked because in a previous match, his opponent had surgical extractioned his Hogaks. And that person, when they were extracting them, must have bent the sleeves on all of the Hogaks, which is how they were marked. And somehow maybe this isn't what he told the judges, or maybe he was more persuasive when he told the judges. But when I heard that, I was just like, I really wish you hadn't told me that, because that just sounds so ridiculous that I would have been happier not knowing. Because like when you're in that situation where the judges, I didn't get to see the cards. I'm just trusting the judges to have made a good decision, and that's their job. I'm willing to live by the judge's discretion in that case. But what I was told really made me think I'm not that happy about what happened here.
Yeah, you were kind of like, willing to believe anything until that happened. Yeah. Is this the PT that you got caught at?
No.
No,
that
it's
was
not.
Barcelona. Yuya was London.
Okay, yeah.
They were both
you
modern.
was London, that's right.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I didn't lose I lost the match, which made it feel especially bad.
Yeah, that's the absolute worst. Where you're just kind of on ice for ages, and your opponent's about like just millimeters from being thrown out of the tournament, and they just come back and attack for lethal.
Yes, basically.
I saw you started posting videos on YouTube too, Andrew. Do you plan on being like super serious about it? Do you not know yet, or is it just once in a while things when you feel like you have?
I've been trying to be very serious about it, actually. I've been posting Alchemy videos almost every day since Alchemy came out. I took a little bit of a break over Thanksgiving, but other than that, I've been posting multiple videos every week. And I actually put a fair amount of time into them. Yeah. They're kind of deck tech videos with a little bit of gameplay.
Yeah,
but I go over the deck building for each of the decks. I think they're pretty good videos. I'm definitely still getting used to the editing and the production.
Yeah,
that stuff is still showing like there's still room to improve.
That part is kind of fun. What software do you use?
I've been using Shotcut just because I like using open source software when it's available. It seems to work pretty well, but there doesn't really seem to be a lot of call for super fancy editing in Magic videos anyway. So it's just really
not for that kind of videos, I guess. Yeah.
Thing is, I did one video where I was going over all of the Alchemy card nerfs. Yeah. And that was one where I really felt like my production skills weren't up to what they needed to be to make a good video. Yeah. But for the ones that are just like building a deck on Arena, talking about it, and then playing, I think I've got that pretty under control. Yeah, I also I don't know if you've gone and watched any of the videos. I made one video with the most recent set championship. I played Blue-Red, Control, and Historic. Yeah. And I played just a really, really great match. Well, great game, I guess, against a guy playing Junk Food, where I beat him by playing Shark Typhoon and then Archmage's Charming his ovens. and then playing instants to make shark tokens and sacking them to the ovens and gaining life. And it like the game went on forever, and it really mattered that I'd gained all the life. It was a great game.
Yeah.
I think you could learn a lot from that video, specifically because you've always been so hesitant to hard cast Shark Typhoon, and it was the key to my victory.
Yeah. Yeah, I recorded a lot of my matches from that tournament and didn't end up using it. I'm not ready for the YouTube long haul kind of grind, but I've been posting also like videos here and there when I feel like I have something a little special or fun or especially interesting and timely.
Yeah. I've been trying to take it pretty seriously, and I am trying to get people to, go and sub and start watching the videos.
Yeah.
I'm pretty proud of what I've been making. I think it's actually good Magic content. It's been a long time since I've tried to actually make somewhat serious Magic content.
Yeah.
But this is going to be a thing you're going to keep going kind of through next year or final year of MPL and off into the foreseeable future, you imagine?
I don't know. Honestly, I feel so much better about making Magic content now that they've killed off the MPL. My experience in the MPL was it just really made me dislike the whole Magic content thing, because I felt like what they were doing with the MPL was so bad, and they weren't working to improve it. So there was nothing, as an individual member of the MPL who was making content, there was nothing I could do to overshadow just how bad everything WotC was doing was. So it really made me have a bad, I guess, like a negative attitude towards actually trying to make content, trying to engage with the community. Now that that's all dead, I feel so much more positive about making content.
I feel like it might have been exacerbated a lot by the first year being kind of essentially contractually obliged to stream, and then having that just vanish as well in the next round. And
that, like, the specifics of how that worked with the contract, I thought was completely reasonable, to be honest. It didn't come as a surprise that it vanished. It was kind of understood that it was only going to be a 1-year thing. But the thing that really poisoned the whole thing was when the weekly league play, their production was just so terrible, and the format selection was so terrible, and the scheduling was just awful. Like they would always have you, they wanted you to be streaming, but you always would have to interrupt your streaming schedule to go and pre-record these matches that were just awful, and nobody was going to want to watch. So it made me very negative on the whole thing.
But you're back into it and enjoying it again. That's good to hear, at least.
Yeah, I've definitely been enjoying playing Alchemy and doing content with it. And honestly, I was enjoying doing. I did standard content before, and standard content was a little bit worse to make, but it was still fun. I was enjoying it.
Should we move on to Price is Right and Life on the Line, maybe?
Yeah, I reckon we should Life on the Line and wrap up, I think.
All right.
Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the Life or the Price?
Let's do Price is Right.
All right.
None of these Alchemy cards have a price, though.
Yeah, one rare wild card.
What are we going to talk about? What card are we going to pick?
It's difficult. So Andrew, I don't know if you've ever listened, but we, due to our contractual obligation to be to card market, at the end of every episode we play a bastardized version of the game The Price is Right, where we try and guess the price of a card on Magic Card Market.
Do one of the holiday cards.
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, all right. I only remember the name of one of them. It's Season's Beatings.
All right, what does it do?
I don't know.
All right, I'm going to say...
there's one that's also like...
I think I have one of the ones they send you, Andrew?
Yeah, they make a Christmas card every year, and
Which is your favorite holiday card?
I have a few of them. I don't know what any of them are called or do. I think there's one that's a goblin. All right, we've got the text for Season's Beating. It's 4 red, so red, sorcery, family gathering. Each creature target player controls deals damage equal to its power to another random creature that player controls.
Right, okay, so it's a play on horrible family dynamics. Okay.
I guess so. I don't know. I'm gonna go €5.
I'm gonna go 46 euros.
Yeah, I reckon Andrew's in the ballpark, right?
Damn, I got tried.
I reckon it's probably kind of like, I reckon €30, and now I'm gonna look it up.
I wonder how much the ones I have are worth.
I can't believe you let me scam you guys like that. I got to suggest the card and then guess the price.
Oh, whatever.
Well, Andrew is the winner. Do you want to know what the actual price of it is, though?
It's obviously 46.
It's obviously like close to 100.
Yeah, available from €84.
I wonder if they have that one. I don't think I do. It doesn't. The casting cards doesn't look familiar.
I think that one might be from
Wow.
a couple years ago or more. I've never seen that one before.
Where is it from? It's 2009, apparently.
Yeah, it's more than a couple years ago.
Yeah, that is more than a couple of years ago. Right, okay. So that's the end of the prices, right? Thank you very much, Card Market, for sponsoring this podcast. Go and buy seasoned beatings from Card Market for the low price of €84. Okay. Life on the line.
Sure.
Theoretical tournament that you're playing tomorrow, and if you win, you live, and if you lose, well, that's the end of your time on the earth. You die. You have to bring a deck from any format we've talked about this week, which I guess we just do Alchemy and I guess Historic as well.
Me just Alchemy.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Any thoughts?
Well, I have a question about, so is the goal to live or not in the construct of this game? It seems ambiguous.
It is. The goal is to live, Andrew.
Technically it's to live, but I've played from the other side before.
Well, I'm going to pick blue-white control in Alchemy. That's the deck that I've had the most success with, for sure.
Oof. I'm going to just go with trusty red-black vamp.
I've played 0 Alchemy, but I think I trust Andrew more than Gab at this point in my life. I barely know him, but I know Gab quite well. So blue-white it is.
All right, good beats.
Well, I guess since I'm playing the role of host, that brings us to the end of the episode. This is the normal part where we share social media and contact information. So, Andrew, where can we find you on social media, etc.?
You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Cuneo. You can find me on Twitch at Andrew Cuneo, and you can find me on YouTube, which you have to just search for Andrew Cuneo on YouTube, I guess, because I'm not a successful enough YouTube channel to have my own URL yet.
Okay. But if you go and check that out, maybe he will become a successful YouTube channel, and then he'll have his own URL.
Yeah, that would be so great.
Yeah, that would be good. You could probably also find your content under the hashtag free Tobias Andrew on, but it might be a little bit outdated.
I haven't tweeted about that in a while.
Honestly, that was some of my favorite Twitter moments, is the free Tobias Andrew on era.
Did you see the whole culmination of the free Tobias Andrian movement?
I don't think I did, actually. I definitely saw something about not freeing Goss to Dirk, though.
Well, so at one point I went to a GP Vegas, and Watsu was very nice, and they gave me a swag bag. I'm not really sure why they gave it to me, but they did. And it had an unopened pack of English Legends in it. And
yeah. I remember that was the series of GP, right?
The thing to do was not to sell it, but to crack it on a stream. So I cracked it, and I literally opened Tobias Andrian in the pack. I literally freed Tobias Andrian, who had been imprisoned in this pack for like 20 years.
For Shieldton.
Was that the rare?
No, that was the uncommon. The rare was, I opened like the worst possible rare you could get. It was some horrible card that had also been reprinted in Chronicles. So it was whatever the equivalent of an English Legends bulk rare is, which is still...
I have good memories of Chronicles. I don't know if it was a good... Chronicles has like it was all reprint, right? Kind of?
Yeah, it was all white border reprints of cards that were very expensive.
Yeah, so Chronicles actually had good cards in them, right?
Yeah,
they worth money
cards at the time, for sure.
All right, well, you can find me on twitch.tv/yellowhat streaming. We've got Cube for Charity coming up. December 27, 28. I believe that should be really fun. We raising money for charity, trying to get cube trophies on Magic Online. You can find me on Twitter at @GavNassif and on YouTube, yellowhat, something like that. And yeah, sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Who's on your team for the cube for charity?
It's J-Bro, me, Caleb D, and Meebo against, I believe, I don't know if it's public yet, but it's Jim Davis. I forget now. I think Carmen, Jim Davis. I think he's got some real ringers this year. I mean, I guess he had the ringers last. I think Reed is on his team, I want to say, and maybe Sedipi. Anyways, it's gonna be tough.
So isn't Caleb just gonna get the most trophies? Or J-Bro is one of those guys who plays a lot of cube, right?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but I think I might have gotten the most trophies last year.
That I can't possibly believe that, because I was gonna say, I think I could easily 4x however many trophies you get, but Caleb is hard to compete with.
People just love to underrate me. It's fine. I'm used to it.
I really feel like there's probably about 5 more minutes time for Andrew to just lay into Gab if he really wants. Is there anything you wanted to get off your chest, Andrew?
Well, I do just think I could definitely get 4 times more cube trophies than you.
You haven't come close to making me cry right away.
Yeah, no, I thought I would be nice. I'd go easy on you, which you might think it's because I'm actually trying to be nice, but it's not. It's because the next time I'm on your stream, it's going to be a surprise how mean I'm going to be.
You know, I was convinced you had been on the podcast before, but that's because you're the only one who's nice enough to come and hang out with me when I do these top 8 coverage streams, like co-streams.
Do you really consider it being nice?
I enjoy your company, and the viewers do. And
he's taking pity on you, Gab.
Oh,
the last time you had me on, I went on like a 10-minute rant about how awful you were and how you had said you were awful.
I guess it didn't leave a lasting impression. Did not scar me.
What? You got 60 more seconds to get him. Come on.
All right. I'll tell you a story about how I got Gab in the past. This is maybe like 2013 or something like that. It was before I knew Gab particularly well. We were in Hawaii and we were playtesting for a Pro Tour, and I wound up playing a blue-black control deck that I used Pearl Lake Ancient, and Gab really wanted me to use, I think it was called Prognostic Sphinx, but I made him promise me that I told him, look, I'll play against you, but I'm not going to play with Prognostic Sphinx, and I demand that you don't talk about Prognostic Sphinx the entire time, which I got him to agree to, because Prognostic Sphinx was just awful, and I don't know why he wanted to talk about it, but he did. But he was true to his word, and he didn't bring it up the entire time we were playing.
I love when people remember these stories. I wish I could remember stories as well as Andrew and everyone else. Anyways, yeah, if you made it this far, I'm guessing you're glad you did because you got to hear that amazing story.
That's right.
And yeah, thank you so much for watching / listening. Hope you'll have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, happy holidays, and thanks for joining us, Andrew. You can come back anytime and
thank you so much, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
All right, later, everyone.
Bye.